What's good, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about Invincible Season 3. I got 3 questions for you guys if you choose to drop an answer in the comment section. We're going to start off with 1. Do you care about being spoiled? Because I see the YouTube things that show up in the shorts feeds, and I look at where the story goes in the future. I don't know when we're going to get to a lot of those things that I've seen over time, but it doesn't bother me at all that I'm spoiled on some of the things that are going to happen in the comics. That leads me to my more important question is, how do you feel about the pacing of the show and how much time they're spending on the events? That's something we're going to talk about in great detail. And the third question is, how do you feel about Invincible Season 3's animation? Because that's another thing we're going to talk about at length. So first point, want to talk about the pacing of it. I feel like the show is great. I'm really enjoying it, but the pacing of it still feels too fast. It's one of the things that I said when I talked about the season after those first 3 episodes dropped. I really enjoyed the beats that the story was hitting. The only criticism I had, animation aside, was that the story was progressing too quickly. We went too fast from Amber to Eve and from Eve to I love you, and it's really quick. Here, I think the stuff with Eve has played out well over the back half of the season. That's not really the part I want to complain about. This is spoiler review, talking about the show in great detail. And so Conquest shows up at the end of episode 7, and then we get the fight with Conquest in episode 8. Also, episode 7 was the Invincible War, if I'm thinking right. My issue comes up with the idea of these big events lasting for such a short amount of time. Now, again, I'm very much online, and I see a lot of things online, people talking about the comics versus the show and all that stuff, and none of it bothers me. I'm enjoying what I'm getting. But I heard people talk about the Invincible War, and they said things like, hey, don't hype it up too much. It was only 1 issue in the comics. And it matches up. It was only 1 issue in the show, but something of that magnitude, I think the show should have taken more time with. I know they are in a rush. It feels like in a rush to get through and get to certain things on screen, but I don't feel like they should have let that whole Invincible War thing be 1 solid episode. They teased it leading up to it, but it was a 1 episode thing. It could have easily been 2, maybe even 3, if we focused in on some of these different versions of Mark and really let the fight scenes play out. But you know, maybe that's a budgetary animation thing that they're trying to avoid, because truth be told, the animation was lacking in the first half of the show, but in the second half of the show, especially with all the fights that we've seen, I don't think the animation was lacking much at all. Although you can still see it in a pinch where they kind of cut corners and do the minimal amount of movement for their characters. Continuing on that same line of pace, I want to talk about Conquest. Like, I knew about the Conquest fight. I knew kind of how it would go because, you know, I see the shorts where people talk about in the comics, this is what happened with the Invincible War. This is what happened when Conquest arrives. And I've heard the rundown of the entirety of the fight. But the fact that the fight was pretty much over and you still had almost 20 minutes left of episode, I feel like it's kind of a waste of such a big moment in the show. Like, you could have had that be the entirety of the episode. You didn't even have to conclude it in a way where we knew Conquest was finished or defeated for the moment. Like, I really thought they could have took their time and went into way more detail with this fight and had it kind of drag out a little bit more longer. Have Mark show off a little bit more of his strength and all that training that we saw at the beginning of the season and be just slightly more effective and just drag it out a little bit more. We ran through the entire monumental fight of Conquest, the strongest Viltrumite arriving and then like dying, all in like 30 minutes. I feel as though we could have done a bit better with that. And that's my overall take on the show. Honestly, the animation stuff doesn't bother me as much as it bothers some other people. You know, I can tell that, you know, in spots they're cutting corners. But for the most part, I'm happy with what we get, and I'm more here for the story than I am stellar animation. I really enjoy animation that's done well. Yeah, I think it's the best thing about Demon Slayer. It's animated amazingly every time we get something from them. I'm not really watching Invincible for that reason. I'm watching it to see the story play out and see the changes that they make to the show versus what I've heard of and seen in the comics. I like all the end credit scenes that they drop, the little crumbs that they sprinkle, because some of this stuff is stuff that I'm unfamiliar with. Like when we see the demons underground and the markings that they're making and talking about other people coming back. The fact that they're bringing back the Martian that takes over people when he touches them. Like, all that stuff is really, really cool. And I'm glad that they sprinkled all that stuff in. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Invincible and any other questions that I opened up asking. I don't care about the spoilers. I do feel like the pace of the show is still too fast and the animation is lacking in spots, but for the most part, I'm here for the story, and the lacking animation doesn't bother me that much. Those are the summary of my thoughts. Let me know any of yours in the comment section, and that's all we got for this one, y'all. Enjoy yourself, guard your heart, and go watch something good.